did die. And by no fault. Okay, let's talk about why I wish I would have gotten an abortion with my first son. This sounds crazy, but I need you to know that he did die. And by no fault of my own. I was 19 when I got pregnant with him, and I was not in a very good financial state, and with not doing well in life like at all. I just moved out on my own and had a shitty job at a gas station. I was not planning on getting pregnant. It was not my intention to do so, but you know, shit happened. I actually found out really early and immediately got on Medicaid and went to my first appointment by like 9 weeks, I think it was. I had a nurse practitioner, and she was also pregnant. She was pregnant the same amount as me, maybe a little bit less. But I had this nurse practitioner, and we went to our anatomy scans. We were in there all the time. I ended up doing a panorama to see like the gender of the baby. And it ended up coming up that there was like a flag that he might have like some kind of genetic problem. When talking to my doctor, she was saying that it could be a cleft lip or this or that. But we're going to get me in to see a specialist so they can look at the scans and figure out what the problem is. They ended up being booked out until I was about 6.5, 7 months pregnant. So at this point, from 14 weeks on, we just were waiting for this appointment in Dallas. Mind you, I'm getting regular ultrasounds. I did my 20-week check where they check the circumference of the head, yada, yada, yada. I'm literally a 19-year-old kid, and I had never really seen an ultrasound before, and I didn't know what I should be looking for and what is abnormal. So when my ultrasound tech is being kind of weird and just not talking during this 20-week ultrasound, I thought it was weird, but I just got a weird vibe, I should say. I didn't think it was weird, but I thought maybe she was just having a bad day or so whatever. And then at the end, I'd be like, everything okay? And she'd be like, your doctor will talk to you about the results. And she said this every single time. And now looking back as a fully grown adult with a fully formed frontal lobe, she was hinting that something was wrong. But she couldn't tell me that, right? So I Go see my doctor. My doctor's like, yeah, everything's fine. Everything's good. You know, da da da. I'll see you again in 2 weeks or a month or whatever the fuck it was. And that's all well and good. Well, finally, after all these months, it is time for my appointment in Dallas. We wake up that morning, we go to Dallas. I have like a 9 a.m. appointment, so we had to leave pretty early. It's like 2 hours away from where I live. So we go to Dallas. We're like having a very normal day. I'm like big pregnant. I'm excited. I'm buying stuff. Like I'm having this baby, and I wanted to have this baby. You know what I'm saying? And I get to the appointment. I go in there. They're gonna do like a vaginal ultrasound. Before he even puts anything inside me or looks or anything, he's like, you know, we love our baby, but our baby isn't gonna make it, and you know, da da da. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, you know, your baby has anencephaly. You can look on these scans. At this point, because I've never had a vaginal ultrasound at this point, which now I know is also probably kind of weird, because at first I probably that should have been the first one I had. But, and looking up on the monitor, like, it is clear as day that he does not have the top of his head. They also have very widened, like, eye sockets, because there's no, like, top right here, so there's no front. So it just looks like a skeleton almost, or like an alien from, like, a vaginal ultrasound. And so I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck? He starts recommending to me that I essentially have a late-term abortion, because it is really bad for your body to continue to carry a child with anencephaly. It can cause a lot of health issues, and because apparently there's something that leaks out of their brain, or it mixing with the amniotic fluid. It does some kind of something, and I can't even remember now. I honestly didn't remember then either, because I was so traumatized. But you don't want to carry a baby with anencephaly to full term. You're also very susceptible to preeclampsia. I do know that part for sure. So he's like basically giving me all my options and telling me that he thinks I should get a late-term abortion. At this point, I'm actually devastated. I don't give him an answer. I'm like, I don't know. I need to think about it. And I continue to just think about it all the way up until I'm full term pregnant. I never made a decision. I didn't feel like I had enough information to make a decision, and I was scared, and I wanted this baby, and so I went through with it and decided that I would just wait. Let me tell you why this decision deeply impacted his life and also my life. Not only just like the health risks that I was putting myself up for, this decision would cause him to suffer greatly. I went in on 2 separate occasions to try and have a vaginal delivery. I was in the hospital a week the first time, and then a week the second time, before deciding that I should just have a C-section, because this is never going to happen. We're never going to have a vaginal delivery. Babies with anencephaly do not have a round head, so they cannot cause your cervix to dilate the proper amount that it needs to in order for you to have the baby vaginally. I have him in the hospital by C-section. He's born and he is very much alive. He was supposed to be dead when he was born. That is what all of the doctors will tell you, is that it's a traumatic thing for a baby, birth in general, and that babies with anencephaly cannot really sustain life at that kind of stress level. And so they usually are born asleep. No, not him. He was born very much alive, and he actually greatly suffered for 4 days based on my decision. And to a lot of people, it doesn't seem like it was suffering, but it was a very selfish thing that I did. And he was having seizures every couple minutes or so. His brain was open, obviously, and so it was very overstimulating for him, and he had a really rough time. After about a day of him being alive, my pediatrician and my doctor came in the room to let me know if I wanted to put a feeding tube in, because he could not he couldn't latch on to anything and drink milk. He was struggling a lot with that, and so he had not eaten in 24 hours. I'm gonna have to make a part 2. Okay, let's talk about why I wish I would have gotten an abortion. Okay, this is part 2 on why I wish I would have had an abortion with my first son. Okay, and at this point, they've come into the room to ask me if I wanted to put a feeding tube in because it's been 24 hours and he won't latch on to anything because his brain is underdeveloped, obviously, and he can't figure out how to drink from a bottle or a boob or anything like that. And at this point, like, he's supposed to die any point now, and so I'm like, is that ethical for me to like put a feeding tube in for him to just to keep him alive longer? Like, he's supposed to have already died, and it's been 24 hours. And he's obviously like suffering. He's in a lot of pain. We had given him a bath because we just wanted that experience. And I cannot stress enough that if you were going to go through with delivering your child with anencephaly, do not give them a bath. It was very overstimulating for him and for his brain, I guess. I'm really not sure. But he was in so much obvious pain after that and having seizures back to back to back to back. And just very, very uncomfortable. It was very clear that he was very uncomfortable after that situation. He was really not having any seizures before that, but after that, he was very uncomfortable and he was very much in pain. But the doctor basically told me, like, hey, I don't think it's unethical, but I think it's your choice what you want to do. If we do not put a feeding tube in, he will starve to death in the next hour or two. An unimaginable decision, honestly. So I decide I'm going to put a feeding tube in. We do that. He continued to live for 3 more days. 3 more very agonizing, uncomfortable days. On September 4th, he was born on September 1st. So on September 4th, we decide, or they decide, that we can't stay at the hospital anymore in the labor and delivery wing, that we've either got to take this baby home to die, or we've got to go to hospice until this baby dies. I was on Medicaid, and so they really they give you the bare minimum of everything when you're on Medicaid, and so, you know, it is what it is. They were going to transfer me to the hospice in a ambulance. That way we weren't alone with this very medically fragile baby. And we were, you know, at least with professionals, to where, like, no, we didn't feel like personally responsible for his life, because he was very medically fragile and he was clearly, like, not doing well. They really should have just let me stay for 1 more day, because this would be his last day on earth anyway. Anyway, so we get in my baby daddy's car, his mom's car, and she is driving us from Longview to Tyler for hospice. Okay, let's talk about why I Okay, let's talk. Okay, let's do it. Okay, this is part 2 on and I only brought it to the hospital because I wasn't expecting to bring home a baby at this point. On the way there, the road you drive down is very much anyway. Anyway, so we get in my baby daddy's car. We've either got to take this baby home to die, or we've got to go to hospice until this baby dies. I was on Medicaid, and so they really they give you the bare minimum of everything when you're on Medicaid. And so, it is what it is. They were going to transfer me to the hospice in a ambulance. That way we weren't alone with this very medically fragile baby. And we were, at least with professionals to where we didn't feel personally responsible for his life. Because he was very medically fragile and he was clearly not doing well. They really should have just let me stay for one more day because this would be his last day on earth anyway. Anyway, so we get in my baby daddy's car, his mom's car, and she is driving us from Longview to Tyler for hospice, because I guess Medicaid only covers certain places. I'm not entirely sure, but we had to go all the way to Tyler for this situation. We would have taken my car, but my car literally had no AC. Was just literally a piece of garbage car. And I only brought it to the hospital because I wasn't expecting to bring home a baby at this point. On the way there, the road you drive down is very much very bumpy. He was in a car seat. They did the car seat test and everything. He was very well strapped in. We had a blanket kind of rolled behind his head so that he wouldn't shake so much or flop back and forth or anything like that. And on the way there, he started to have seizures. And during one of his seizures, as you're sternum rubbing to try and bring them out of it, he turned blue about 5 minutes away from the hospice place. And then he died right there in a car. Didn't even make it to the hospice place. I've been to therapy since this, but for many years, this was in 2016. So for many years, I have felt a lot of guilt because whether or not I meant to or not, I contributed to the suffering of my own baby. Me and many others contributed to the suffering of this baby. Because if I had known that that was wrong with him when I wasn't 7 months pregnant almost, I would have had an abortion, because it's just not, he was not going to survive. And it is, in my opinion, the suffering of a baby for selfish reasons. Very selfish reasons. And I wanted him very much, but I would have aborted him if given the right information at the right time. And if I had it to do over, I would have had a late-term abortion and saved myself, my family, him from a lot of suffering, because I don't think people understand. They think it's a good thing. If you get to meet your baby alive. But it is not a black and white thing. There is this gray area of absolute trauma that can come from deciding you're gonna try and meet this baby alive. It can literally change the course of your entire life. And yeah, so just something to think about when you're out here posting those, I was 16 and he deserved to live, so I don't believe in abortions. There's a lot of reasons why somebody would get an abortion that you just know nothing about, because your frontal lobe isn't developed enough to think about how complex these situations can be and are for a lot of women. And that's not to say that I don't think you should be able to be young and have a baby, or have an opinion for yourself on these types of things. But that's why there's pro-choice, because you choose to not do that, but you have no idea what kind of trauma and shittiness, just straight shittiness, you are putting on someone else when you vote against things like this. Trauma for the baby, or as they become a child, they could live in a shitty situation. There's a lot of reasons why I think people have abortions, and it's not just a black and white thing where you're just trying to use it for fucking birth control. And even if you fucking are, I literally don't give a fuck. I think that it is crazy to think that we shouldn't all have the option to do so, because it leaves all these gray areas out in the fucking cold. You know what I mean? And if I had it to do all over again, I would have aborted him late term like my doctor recommended to me. But that's not an option anymore. So, okay, this is part 2 on why I wish I would have had an abortion with my first son. Okay, and at this point, they've come into... Okay, let's